Hello and welcome back to my show. We've been discussing about why we are not able to speak in English. That's a very important factor we've been discussing, and I would like to continue. We've been discussing about 20 to 15 points, and I'd like to continue. And personal preference becomes a very important factor. Our personal choice, the language that we prefer. Most often we prefer to speak in our native language than in English. So personal preference becomes a very, very important factor here in choice of language. Language revitalization efforts. There are efforts made to revitalize or bring back endangered languages. So in this process, people might again catch up to revitalizing their native language, which is endangered, rather than catching up to a new language. This again is a very important cultural phenomenon. Multilingualism is speaking different languages or appreciating and celebrating multiple languages. We may choose our own language even in spite of a multilingual context because of various reasons. And language pride is very important here. The pride with which we own our language, we celebrate our language, also stops us from learning English, because we are proud about our own language and we celebrate it. That is again something that stops us. And that again stops us. Educational pedagogy, the medium of instruction, how subjects are taught. What is the medium of instruction? What is the preferred choice of language? Most often native language becomes the choice because it is easily conveyed to a group of people who belong at different education levels. So naturally, language which is not familiar is not chosen as a medium of instruction. It's easy for people to communicate in their native language, that which majority of them might be able to accept. Language of trade. What's a lingua franca? Most often, even in local cultures, the language of trade might be the local native language. So again, in spite of the trade opening up, in spite of globalization, the language that is used for trading purposes is a local language. If it is there, then sustenance of a new language is still a question. Artistic expression. Majority of artistic expressions are kind of, it's seen as expressive in native language than in a language which is not that very familiar to the culture. So artistic expression is also a very important factor here. So it also conveys richness, cultural richness and authenticity, because it's done through, expressed through the native language. So it's seen like that. It's seen as rich and very elaborate and authentic in its own ways. So mental processing. Some individuals or majority of individuals may think quickly in their native language. They can process information. Mental processing can be quick and smart if they use their native language. So their choice is naturally their native language then. Language familiarity. If we are not familiar with the language, we are not going to adapt to it or adopt it because we are unfamiliar to it. So naturally that becomes a deterring factor. Language barrier perception. Fear of making mistakes, being understood in English, is also a barrier perception which may stop us from using English. Language shift. Language shifts within generations may result in continued dominance of native language rather than English. So that language shift. It may be the native language may continue to dominate this language shift in spite of English being the second language. Ethnic enclaves. So most often people belonging to a particular ethnic group prefer speaking in their own ethnic language. So within that ethnic group, the English is not spoken, so naturally it's not transmitted from one generation to the other. So we'll stop here and keep sharing. Just Start is a foundation for improving our communicative intelligence, and I hope it does some good to you. Thank you very much.